Let's begin.
Hello and welcome to Pods Above Replacement, part of the Padres Hot Tub Podcast Network. My name is Raphie Cantor. I am the producer of Padres Hot Tub, and joining me from the Mile High City, he's gone to Korea and he's worked out a few things. It's John Prakoda.
Hey. All right, Raphie. Quiz to start. Name 2 K-pop artists right now that are like very famous within the culture.
Okay, so do I have to name the specific people by name, or can I name the group?
The band. The group.
Okay, Blackpink.
1.
That's 1. And okay. Is Psy still big? From Gangnam Style?
I don't know. I wasn't thinking of that. I was thinking more of like the young ones.
More of
that
like
counts. That should count.
That should count it? Okay, cool. And to be completely fair, like, I know Blackpink is like one of the biggest bands in the world right now, and they just headlined Coachella, but it's only on my radar because one of the Blackpink singers is currently on this season of The White Lotus, which is set in
nice.
Yeah, it's set in Thailand, and she's Thai. So she's there playing one of the people who works at the hotel. So if you had asked me that question a week ago, I might not have been able to give you 2.
BTS is the other one I was thinking of.
Yes, of course. Okay, yes, I should have known that. Well, we are going to talk about someone who went to Korea and worked some things out, and that's Kyle Hart. But before we do that, we're going to talk about the marquee signing so far of the Padres offseason, and that's Nick Pivetta. A lot to say about Nick Pivetta, John, don't you think?
Yes. He's one of those guys who, like, over the course of time, he will always pop up at the top of like all the data points that nerds love the most. So I've seen his name like a million billion times, and I've always known that he's like had good stuff, or at least good like specific tools, but he's never been that good of a pitcher. So it was really fun to dive into him and see like, why isn't this guy an ace?
Yeah, I'm aware of him from fantasy baseball mostly. That's my biggest relationship with him. You know, him being in the AL East, us being NL West fans. So I haven't really watched a ton of him, but I always, he was always this kind of, I'm in a points league, so he was always kind of this white whale of strikeouts that you could potentially get, but he would get dinged on home runs, which if his fantasy profile, much like his real profile, is kind of a mixed bag, depending on the strengths of the league that you're in. But he presents a very interesting sort of story and road to the big leagues. He was originally from Victoria, British Columbia, so we have Canadian Nick Pivetta on the team. No word on the status if his contract will be subject to tariffs. That will be for a different time. But he was drafted in 2013 in the 4th round by the Washington Nationals. He was a junior college kid. He played in New Mexico Junior College. Did not pitch at all his senior year of high school because he had a UCL injury. So, I mean, ahead of the curve, I guess you can say. So he goes to JUCO. He's kind of whatever his first season, and he pitches his second season there. He goes 9-2 with a 3.36 ERA. How do you like those old school stats? Even more old
JUCO
school.
ERA. This is dope.
The JUCO ERA and his win-loss record. I'm scraping at the bottom of the barrel, John. He did pitch 6 complete games, which I did find was interesting. So for someone whose longevity is going to be a topic of this conversation, just know he does have it in the bag. So yeah, he gets drafted by the Nationals in the 4th round. He's in their system for a couple years. He's traded in 2015 with in a deadline deal with the Philadelphia Phillies in return for, do you know who?
Ooh,
John.
Okay, so 2015 Nationals are acquiring somebody for the stretch run, I'm assuming.
Yes.
Is it a reliever?
It is a reliever.
Is it 2015? This is too early for Daniel Hudson.
It is not Daniel Hudson.
So, ooh, I have no idea. It's a Phillies 2015 reliever. No, I have no idea.
One Jonathan Papelbon.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
A nice guy. Got a nice guy in return for Nick Pivetta, Canadian for kind Papelbon, good guy.
Kind Papelbon, yeah, exactly. A little bit of sarcasm I'm sensing there. So yes, so Jonathan Papelbon traded for Nick Pivetta in July of 2015. So he, Pivetta's now in the Philly system, and I always love to do this whenever we go through guys, especially guys who we don't really know that well, and go back through their prospect report. So this is taking from MLB Pipeline, who wrote this in 2016. Quote, with a stronger feel for how the Phillies do things, Pivetta was a much more consistent starter than he was when he first arrived, especially with his delivery. That allowed him to stay in the strike zone with regularity, something that had eluded him at the outset. His low 90s fastball, sometimes touching 95 miles per hour, played up, especially since he throws it with such heavy sink. Pivetta has some power to his breaking ball, and while his slider and curve run together, he flashes a plus curveball at times. He'll show an average changeup as well, though it's more inconsistent. End quote. So, John, potentially pretending a little bit of what was to come for Pivetta, no?
I mean, not the heavy sink fastball.
Not that part.
And the changeup, which was average, has since disappeared. But he did have good breaking stuff, and his velocity was in that range. So he had the tools, I guess, and I still don't think he's put them all together. We'll argue about that later, though.
Well, yeah, I guess we can just kind of do a little bit of the speed run through his career and how he got to the Padres currently. So he's on the Phillies. He makes his major league debut in 2017. Has a decent workload with them, 133 innings. But, I mean, he just gets really knocked around that first season. 6.02 ERA, FIP up in the very high fours, 4.87. Comes back the next year, and we start to get a little bit more of the Nick Pivetta experience, which in 2018, I'm going to read out his stat line, 164 innings pitched, a 4.77 ERA, but a 3.79 FIP, largely on the backs of a 10.32 K per 9 rate, a relatively low 2.8 walks per 9, and for Nick Pivetta, a pretty decent 1.32 home runs per 9. He was a little unlucky with guys left on base, but we're starting to also see the pattern that's formed with him where he gives up a lot of fly balls, and a lot of those fly balls turn into home runs. So that's something that he will continue to be snake bitten by. He's basically replacement level for his last 2 seasons in Philadelphia, ends up in Boston in the middle of the 2020 season. And he's there from mid-COVID season until now, and through that time, he is a low to mid fours ERA pitcher, and he typically carries a slightly better FIP because he has almost a career 10 K per 9 rate. I mean, he strikes out a lot of guys for a starting pitcher, and he walks an average amount of guys, but he's given up a lot of home runs. And that's the thing that, playing in Philadelphia and then subsequently playing in Boston, being a fly ball pitcher, those are not friendly confines for someone with Nick Pivetta's profile. And that will be something, John, that we look to see if it will change once he comes to San Diego.
Yeah, like I said at the onset, I was talking about how this dude is a guy that, I don't know, baseball nerds know a lot about, and there's a good reason to it. Well, first, before I get into this, just so everybody knows, Stuff Plus has updated over the course of this offseason to a new set of how they organize their numbers, such that every 10 points over 100 represents a standard deviation. Thus, Nick Pivetta, with his 122 Stuff Plus slider, is now 2 standard deviations above the average in terms of his slider, which means that it's in the 95th percentile or so in terms of Stuff Plus like value, how good that pitch is, which is incredible. And it's actually like, it's funny because when you do the standard deviation, it like lowers the numbers, but it doesn't actually change how high of a quality of the pitch was. So it used to be like 170 or something crazy, because that's what represented like a 95th percentile slider, and now it's 122. Same stuff, same information, just different way to organize it. So when you see all your numbers, they're not going to probably be as like crazy at the wide ends of it. You know, everybody's going to be between 80 and 120 now, at least for the most part. But anyways, when you look at Nick Pivetta and you look at people who are similar to Nick Pivetta from an analytics perspective for stuff plus, location plus, pitching plus, I mean, you just outlined how his career has been. You know, he's been a 2-WAR-ish player the last 4 years. He was demoted to the bullpen in 2023 because his stuff wasn't working early on. He obviously gets those strikeouts, and he walks some people, but not a crazy amount of people, and he gives up those homers. But when you look at the people who he compares best with in terms of like stuff plus and location plus, you get names that are Luis Castillo, you know, Logan Webb, Chris Sale, Aaron Nola. Those are the kind of guys who have stuff as good as him with his location, his command, and those are not names that you would associate with Nick Pivetta. You know, so what exactly is missing? Why is he not, you know, a Framber Valdez? Why is he not a Cole Reagans? Like, why is he a third or fourth starter with his two WAR per year? And you could say, yeah, he gives up more home runs, but like, why is he giving up home runs when he has such good stuff? Like, so that was the thing that I wanted to dig into for this, because someone with as good of stuff as him, with as good of command as him, if you look on the list, there's literally nobody who has his stuff and his command and is not at least a good pitcher. You know, there's no names that are like that. They either have good stuff but no command, they have good command but no stuff, but there's nobody that's not good, you know, with his having both of those things. And so I was so confused at first. It took a lot of digging. I do have a hypothesis. But I don't know. Did that immediately scream anything to you?
Well, no, and I think I would love to get to your hypothesis in just a moment, but I think the Padres fans are familiar with another guy who came through recently, the starting rotation, who had amazing stuff, but could be frustrating to watch. It was potentially a little bit inconsistent, and you know, had varying innings workloads throughout his career, that, you know, affected his value and output. I'm talking, of course, about Blake Snell. And so, John, I'm wondering if you can just lay out for people, like, you know, Blake Snell has obviously had some pretty incredibly high highs in baseball. I mean, literally, he's a 2-time Cy Young Award winner. Why do you think that Nick Pivetta has never quite had the ceiling that Blake Snell has had?
Okay, so that is me going into my hypothesis.
Yeah, no, let's do
overall. So this is what like kind of immediately screamed out. I mean, I was doing just my cursory look, and my first, like, it's the first thing that I thought. I wrote down initial thoughts, some of the best stuff in the entire game, but entirely predictable. So I was testing that hypothesis, and then so I was reading his, you know, the stories that he's had both on Fangraphs and just from a scouting perspective, and reading some quotes by Nick Pivetta. I was looking at his little Plinko, which is what shows like what the likelihood of him throwing a pitch depending on count. So when it's a 0-0 count, he throws a fastball about half the time. Whereas when it's a 3-0 count, it's like 99% of the time that he's going to throw a fastball, right? And so I was trying to see, does this support my hypothesis or does it refute my hypothesis? And then I started reading quotes by him. And you put up the quote that was from the article that was the quote that it was like most like, oh my gosh, what are you talking about? And it was this quote. I'm going to read it now. It's from an article that he had on Fangraphs. He was speaking with an interviewer, and he, as an interviewee, said, quote, "I'm going to throw a fastball up or down and away to a righty. I'm going to throw a sweeper to a righty. I might mix in a curveball or a euro here or there, but it's going to be mostly fastball sweeper. To a lefty, I'm going to mix in my curveball and go fastball up a little bit more, and maybe a couple of hard downers. I mean, I do look at swings and pay attention to body language during at bats, and I have an idea of from playing against guys in the past, but at the end of the day, it's my strengths against their strengths." And I was like,
I have to stop you, John. I have to stop you because you pronounced gyro gyro, like the Greek
Oh
sandwich.
yeah, I did. Yeah.
instead of a gyro ball, which is
To be
what
fair,
you
I'm
meant,
reading.
which I love because I appreciate that I've now learned that you pronounce it correctly when you're getting the actual Greek sandwich,
That's
which I
true.
do appreciate about you. But I do have to say in this context, I do think he was referring to a gyro ball.
Yes, he was.
Okay, anyway, please continue.
So my point there with his now to be called Euroball is his meaty sweeper is that he's obviously predictable. He's saying that I'm going with my best against your best. I want my strength versus your strength. This would play great as a 1995 closer attitude. You know, it's like my best versus your best. I'm gonna throw my fastball, try to hit it. I'm gonna throw my sweeper, try to hit it. But with modern information that's being passed down to current hitters, I don't know if your best against their best is a great strategy for 150 innings over the course of a season. Probably you should try your best against their worst, and that would be the best strategy for the course of 150 innings. I mean, that's how like Yu Darvish makes his career, right? He's not throwing a predictable pitch. He's throwing intentionally unpredictable pitches as often as he can. And so when you look at Nick Pivetta, especially against right-handed hitters, because right-handed hitters is where this is really frustrating to me. He has great stuff, like I outlined before. He has a great fastball with a good ride, decent velocity for a starting pitcher, and the ride belies his velocity. It makes it seem as though he's throwing harder, and a sweeper with a good break that has whiffs. But if you look at where he puts them in terms of in the strike zone against right-handed hitters, it's so like spot on consistent. I mean, he has great command, so he knows where he's putting it, and he's putting it intentionally. But it's his fastball is up and in or up middle to right-handed hitters. Four-seam fastball there every time. That's always where it's going to be. And then his sweeper is middle away, once in a while middle low to right-handed hitters as well. So a right-handed hitter steps into the box and they're going, okay, Nick Pivetta's pitching to me. What am I going to expect? It's going to be a fastball up and in. It's going to be a sweeper middle away. And that shrinks the strike zone down so much. You can go up there, pick your pitch. You can go, I'm hunting a fastball up and in this at bat and hit the fastball. You could go, oh, I'm hunting the sweeper middle away. And you're probably going to get one of those over the course of your at bat, let alone over 3 at bats, if you're hunting, for your game plan over the course of the day. And so he has great stuff that's entirely predictable. Of course, he's not going to be able to play up to, all these other pitchers who are both have great stuff and aren't, being a bull in a china shop and just trying to run through it as best they can.
Yeah. So about that stuff, because we should really talk about the pitches that make Nick Pivetta who he is and kind of what he's made $55 million at, guaranteed at least on the back of. And so he has 2 really quite exceptional pitches. He has a fastball that, much unlike the prospect report from 2016, is a quote-unquote rising fastball. It's got 2.3 inches above comparable fastballs in terms of vertical rise, if you will. 4.1 inches against the league average in terms of induced movement. So really, really remarkable. We always talk about Jeremiah Estrada on this team as the gold standard. I don't know if you listened to the show that we most recently did, the Padres Hot Tip show, but I shouted out Yuki Matsui and his and his rise, another rise king on this team. Nick Pivetta is certainly joining those ranks. But kind of the pitch that has been the most exceptional through the time that they were writing scouting reports about him in 2016 is his curveball. Nick Pivetta's curveball. I'm just looking at last year, but it had a total of 58.2 inches of vertical drop, which is just really quite remarkable. So almost 5 feet. So that's 4.9 inches better than comparable curveballs. And it's got some decent glove side break to boot. So great news for Nick Pivetta that he's got 2 awesome pitches, and really bad news if you're a left-handed hitter, because those are the 2 pitches that he's throwing to you basically, 80 to 85% of the time. Nick Pivetta throws that fastball over 50% to lefties, and then works in a healthy, I want to say it's around 30% of the curveball there. And then, he's peppering in, that sweeper occasionally that's going to break in on the hands of the lefties. But really, he's looking at those two pitches the most. Unfortunately for Nick Pivetta, he does not throw that curveball basically at all to right-handed pitchers. And so instead, he's relying on a sweeper that is a perfectly fine major league pitch. And he got decent results on it, but from a movement profile standpoint is basically dead average. Looks a lot like a lot of other sweepers that have been thrown in Major League Baseball. That obviously that is the in vogue pitch, so to speak, right now. So you're seeing a lot of hitters are seeing a lot of sweepers, that is. And so that has influenced certainly the fact that Nick Pivetta is one of those righty pitchers that has reverse splits. He fares far better against lefties than he does against righties. Just to put some numbers on that, against lefties last year, he put up a 306 WOBA and an 0.97 WHIP. You compare that against his numbers against righties, a 1.29 WHIP, 345 WOBA. 306 WOBA, pretty good. A 345 WOBA against all righties really leaves a lot to be desired, John.
And with his stuff, it's just frustrating. So yes, his sweeper does not have crazy good, I don't know, anything. What it does have is it's different. It has less vertical drop, which is something that he has said in interviews that he tries to get, meaning that it gets more like it's working on a horizontal plane. It's not dropping as much as you would think it is. And why would you do that from a pitching standpoint? Why would you want that out of your sweeper? It's specifically so that you're reducing the quality of contact on it, because they're not expecting it. So they're still gonna hit it, but since it's not dropping as much, they're gonna pop it up or get weak contact in general. And so that's what his goal is. That's the reason why he's doing that. And he gave up 10 home runs to right-handed hitters on his sweeper alone last year. That's insane. That's an insane amount of home runs to give up on any pitch other than a fastball. On a breaking ball to same-sided hitters, 10 home runs. He led the league. It was by far in terms of sweepers giving up home runs. I think Brandon Pfaadt was second with 8, and then nobody else had more than 6. Because I still say that the reason is because he's so predictable, but also because when he misses his spots, what he tends to do, and you can see it in his movement profile in general, what he's aiming for is middle away. So one, you can hit a home run off of something middle away because, it's high enough and the break is such that, you can lift that from that trajectory. And so he's not even trying to go low a lot of the times. And also when he misses even a little bit, then it's right over the middle. And so that's just a, easy pitch to hit for a home run in general. And so holy crap, how can you give up 10 home runs on your sweeper alone to a major league in a single major league season? One, especially when you have a pitch with a decent movement profile. And two, why didn't you change what you were doing? He never started to switch to most sweepers, which typically are trying to move similar to how his moves, are aiming for the low and away rather than middle away. All the good pitchers do that. I don't understand why he's always going middle away. And especially when the only reason I could see that you might say to do that is because it tunnels better with your fastball up and in. And he specifically in an interview said, I don't really care about tunnels, which is also a concerning thing to say, especially when all his success was predicated against left-handed hitters. The reason why he's so successful is because his fastball and his curveball tunnel very well off of each other, and that's why with only those 2 pitches he's able to be successful against left-handed hitters.
Yeah, so one of the things that I was looking at his movement profile, he never developed that changeup. He occasionally dabbled with the splitter. That splitter never really came to fruition. So all of his pitches are breaking glove side. So it's me, a novice, and someone who likes to look at these numbers and see patterns. I'm thinking, maybe he needs to develop an arm side break pitch, to kind of mix things up a little bit. Maybe that's contributing to some of the predictability problems that he has. John, tell me why I'm wrong.
You're not wrong. It's true. First of all, Niebla likes throwing or getting folks to throw changeups, and a changeup is a great pitch. It has a different movement profile. You can tunnel off of it. It's underrated in terms of a pitch overall, especially if you're only throwing it like 10% of the time or something like that. Then mixing it in is pretty much going to be good for almost every pitcher if they can get a decent movement profile on it. That being said, he has been good against left-handed hitters, and normally a good splitter or changeup is a good weapon to have against the opposite side of the platoon. So it's not, for me, what I was saying before the show started was it wouldn't be like the first thing that I would go after, just because it's not going to be a weapon against right-handed hitters quite as much as it would be against left-handed hitters who he's already performing well against. That being said, your argument wherein he has another weapon a third time through, especially against left-handed hitters, that makes sense to me.
Yeah. So, I mean, look, I'm really intrigued by Nick Pivetta. And in the Fangraphs 2025 best free agents, top 50 free agents, he was ranked 25th by them. And, in their last little section of the blurb, they basically said, oh God, yes. Will the club that inks Pivetta to a deal this winter get the breakout pitcher he's more than capable of becoming, or the one whose average season, excluding the truncated 2020 campaign since coming to Boston from Philadelphia via trade, has been a middling 9 wins and 10 losses with a 4.33 ERA and a 4.20 FIP. 8 years into a big league career during which he's flashed both brilliance and frustrating consistency, 2025 could very well be potential realized. At worst, his team will get a starter with a reputation for being a good clubhouse presence and a student of his craft. Did not have the part of the blurb I was looking for. I was looking for. There was I can't remember where it was. It was in one of these Fangraphs articles. But basically the idea being that like an analytically minded team is probably the most likely one to sign him. Basically a team that's saying, hey, you've got some untapped. Oh, it was earlier. Here it is. This is from Ben Clemens. Ben Clemens said, quote, "My guess is that he'll end up with an analytically inclined team that thinks they can work with his enviable talent and limit the damage on contact downsides. I think that's going to limit his market, but more in terms of the teams involved than the money. I have him getting a perfectly respectable deal, blah, 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 blah." And if you look at the deals that he was projected at getting, the only real difference is the amount of years. Ben Clemens and the median crowdsource both projected him to get 3 years and an AAV of $14 million. And the Padres gave him 4 years and an AAV of just under $14 million. So, I think he presents a really interesting test case. We always talk about that we love Ruben Niebla. We think he's great. We've got this biomechanics lab at Point Loma Nazarene. What's going to happen? What's he going to do? I think Nick Pivetta is this is the blank canvas for Ruben Niebla to paint his masterpiece off of, because the upside on Nick Pivetta is that I'm not even kidding when I say he could be the best pitcher of the 2026 Padres, in the rotation, because Cease is gone, King is gone, and you've got Musgrove coming back from rotation or from a UCL repair. And you have, at that point, what will be a 39-year-old Yu Darvish. So,
dude, I think he could be the best pitcher of the 2025 San Diego Padres, or at least close to it.
Say
it. I honestly believe that. So, okay, so you're saying that we need an analytically inclined team. No, that's not true. What you need is a team who can express analytical thoughts to a player who is not analytically inclined. And this player is not analytically inclined based on the quotes that I've seen so far about him. But we're setting him up with Ruben Niebla, who his whole superpower is basically that he's a cool nerd, right? He can nerd out on stuff and then express it to pitchers in a way that they'll be willing to accept it. And then we have Yu Darvish, Joe Musgrove, and Michael King, all established major league players who are worthy of respect by anybody who's coming onto the team, and all of them are super huge pitching nerds. So you get all these nerds who are all respectable nerds, they're not just talking to a wall. They're talking to a human being, and they're expressing in a way that is emotionally mature about the fact that, hey, when you throw your fastball up and in, you have a X slug of 0.721 against it. Whereas if you throw your fastball low and in to right-handed hitters, guess what? People don't even swing at it anymore because they've already canceled that off of like their thought process of what they're doing against you. His pitches on anywhere in the zone are basically every single spot. People will swing about 70% of the time when it's in the zone. Low and in, right-handed hitters swing 38% of the time. They have an X-Slug of .050 and an X-Woba of .035. Want to know why? It's not because his pitches low and in are like amazing and they're impossible to hit. It's because he never throws it there. So everybody who goes into the box has literally just canceled that out of their thought process in terms of what to expect. So if it's going to be there, they're going to be like, whatever. This is something that I've canceled out. I'm not even thinking about it. So if Yu Darvish goes in and goes, hey, every single time you're throwing up and in or middle away, and it's not working, have you considered doing something like this? Going every once in a while low and in, every once in a while getting your sweeper, wasting it off the plate low and away so that you can set up a fastball that would tunnel off the same thing. If Yu Darvish says that to you, then you're going to respect him because Yu Darvish is one of the most, respected pitchers probably in current baseball right now at this point. So
yeah,
there's like I said at the front, there's very few pitchers who have his stuff in his command. Literally, there are like less than 20 pitchers who have a combination of command and stuff than Nick Pivetta, which puts him into ace material, like ace level pitcher. Dylan Cease is the only Padres pitcher who is close in terms of stuff and command, and Darvish and King are obviously also very good pitchers. They are the ones that are not quite Cease, more like basing things on sequencing, basing things on tunneling in order to get extract the most juice out of their orange, out of their melon. And Nick Pivetta is extracting nothing out of his. So I don't see why a pitcher with his stuff meeting people who are saying like, let's mix it up a little bit, could not be incredibly successful.
Yeah. Okay, any final thoughts beyond what we've discussed before we move on to our next pitcher?
No. I just think that he needs to move his fastball command around a little bit. He has good command. Unless he's like what was it? Not Joey. Yeah, wait, Uncle Joe? No, not Uncle Joey. What's the other uncle in Full House? The cool one?
Uncle Jesse?
Uncle Jesse, yeah. Do you remember the episode where he can find his spot and he's playing against Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, but he can only shoot the ball from one certain spot, and he would always make it from that one certain spot? Maybe there's a chance that Nicky P can only hit his certain spots, and that's why his fastballs are always in the same spot and his sweepers are always in the same spot. But if he's not Uncle Jesse, and he can move things around just a little bit with his command and his stuff, I literally think he could be an ace. I truly believe that.
Well, I'm very excited to see what Nick Pivetta does in a Padres uniform. Someone with a very different story, who I think we're going to have an interesting opinion on, is Kyle Hart. So Kyle Hart is kind of the capstone to the Padres pitching depth situation. He was signed for $1 million out of the KBO. That's where he pitched last season with the NC Dinos. He's got some escalators that are built into his deal based on, how much he starts, how much he contributes, etc. And the Padres also have a $5 million club option for him on next season. Really interesting story because he was a fifth-year senior. He went to the University of Indiana. He gets drafted by the Red Sox in the 19th round. And he kind of just floats through the Red Sox minor league system. He's never a heralded prospect. He never makes the, top 30 prospects for MLB Pipeline during his time in Boston. But he puts up, really respectable numbers, in 2017 across low and high A. He put up a 3.26 FIP in 117 innings. In 2019 across multiple levels, AA and AAA, he put up a 3.85 FIP. And so then, he's looking to graduate the system in 2020. And again, because Pipeline doesn't have a write-up on him, Fangraphs doesn't have a write-up on him, like nothing like that. Here is a write-up that I found from SoxProspects.com. Shout out to them.
Oh man, I still go on that every day. Soxprospects.com. What a great site.
Soxprospects.com. This scouting report was released on August 12th of 2020. Quote, potential emergency major league depth arm, ceiling of a
Great
spot
start.
starter, great start. Ceiling of a spot starter or depth swingman type. Age and lack of a plus pitch limit ceiling. Throws 5 pitches and will use them in any count. Does a good job mixing his pitches to keep hitters off balance. Strong pitchability and feel on the mound. Solid command and control profile. Could struggle to get major league hitters out with his high 80s fastball, so will have to play off his secondaries off of his four-seamer. Wouldn't be surprising if he had a run in the majors, if given an opportunity, given his consistent success in the minor leagues. So he goes up to Boston and, he pitches 11 innings for the 2020 Red Sox in the COVID season. And during that time, he puts up a 15.55 ERA.
That's impressive.
And if you're worried and saying maybe he had some unlucky batted ball luck, he put up an 8.28 FIP.
Okay,
so I
better,
guess you could say technically unlucky. He gave up 3.27 home runs per 9. We were talking about Nick Pivetta having home run trouble. That's more than double what Nick Pivetta has typically put up at Boston. And he also walked 8.18 guys per 9 innings. So look, he threw 11 innings in the big leagues. It didn't really go well. Could be forgiven. But he basically had a really long and winding road. He goes and makes this brief late big league debut. Gets sent back down to the minors, elects for minor league free agency, signs with the Phillies before the 2023 season. He only pitches 1 game in the Phillies AAA system, and then he's released. And then he goes to Tacoma to play for the Seattle's Mariners AAA affiliate, and he's there for the rest of 2023. And, this guy's career seemingly is running its course. And then he decides to go to Korea, and he plays for the NC Dinos. And then he has a truly remarkable 2024 season with the NC Dinos. So he leads all of the KBO in strikeouts, even though he threw 40 fewer innings than the league's innings leaders. So he threw 157 innings last year. He puts up a 2.69 ERA, a 1.03 WHIP. He strikes out 182 guys, and he walks just 38. So really just a sensational season. Completely revitalized this guy's career. Comes back over, thinks that he's going to get a pretty substantial major league deal. You had folks like Ben Clemens at Fangraphs predicting he was going to get a 3-year, $8 million per, so $24 million deal. Median crowdsource was a little more pessimistic, but had him at 2 years and $7.3 million AAV, so $14.5 million overall. That deal structure is very reminiscent of the person that he was being compared to, and someone who I know you're going to bring up, which is Eric Fetty, who signed a 2-year, $15 million deal with the White Sox when he came over after being quite effective in Korea. But the market did not value Kyle Hart in the same way that they valued Eric Fetty. So, John, perhaps you can tell us a little bit why.
Why I would argue, so I would probably be the same way as how the market valued him, and that I would be a little bit skeptical about relating him to Eric Fetty. And the reason why is, so Eric Fetty goes over to the KBO, and he's a, not great major league pitcher, but he has experience. And what is he going over there to do? He's trying to work on a bunch of pitches and their shapes, and so that he can come back to America as what I would call a junk merchant, right? Somebody who's throwing 1 million pitches. He's throwing them, none of them a high percentage of the time, so you don't know what you're getting. His primary pitch is a cutter, so you're not up there looking for a four-seam fastball. You kind of have to read and react. You don't necessarily have a good game plan against him because he's throwing so many things. Kyle Hart was struggling in AAA and obviously in the majors, And he, at the time, was going with a slider first approach because that was his, the best pitch that he could consistently throw in the strike zone. So he's basically like a slider changeup guy because those are the pitches that, one, that he could get into the strike zone, and then two, like, had the most swing and miss on it. And so he goes into Korea, and he's still sporting that 90-mile-an-hour fastball. To this point, I don't really know. I have some KBO data on like the induced vertical that he was throwing, but when he was in America, he was throwing both a four-seamer and a sinker. His KBO data is kind of in between those two in terms of shape, so it kind of looks to me, it's more sinkery looking, so it kind of looks to me like he was throwing probably a sinker more often, and maybe ditched the four-seam, or at least was not throwing the four-seam a lot, which means that he was going slider. I mean, he was going sinker, slider, changeup, and based on the reports, he was throwing the sinker 47% of the time. 55% of the time of that, it was in the zone, so, not high for a fastball. He was kind of nibbling probably with his sinker, probably because it's not that good of a pitch. But he was mostly going off that, and then he could get to his better pitches, which are his slider, which he went to the KBO and he worked on it and he made it more of a sweeper. Okay. And then his changeup, which actually gets swing and miss. It's kind of his only pitch that gets swing and miss. And so he was kind of nibbling. He was throwing a sweeper that he could throw in the strike zone more often because unlike Nick Pivetta, when he throws his sweeper in the zone, it doesn't get smashed. So he was able to play with that in the strike zone. And it made it such that he could get to those because he was getting ahead of the count because people weren't dominating his fastball like they were when he was stateside. So I do wonder whether when he comes back to America and he's trying to get ahead in the count by throwing a sinker at 90 miles an hour, his average there in the KBO was 90.8. If he's throwing a 91 mile an hour fastball, that's a sinker. How quickly do people start looking for that and jumping on it, especially if he's throwing 47% of the time like he did in the KBO. That means that it was working well enough that he could throw it 47% of the time and thus get to his junk. I don't know whether he's ever going to be able to get to his breaking stuff or his off-speed stuff if he can't spot that, I guess, sinker or whatever the fastball is extraordinarily well. And I don't know whether he's going to be able to do that. I can't think of too many people who are spotting 91 mile an hour sinkers like on a dot and getting ahead in the count consistently, and nobody's ever adjusting to them in modern Major League Baseball. So I don't know. There's not a lot of comps that I can make to him that would be like, oh, this guy is going to be successful. I almost wish that he kind of did go heavier with the sweeper while he was in KBO just to see what would happen if he's like throwing that almost as much as he's throwing his fastball, and just kind of, like I said, junk merchanting, kind of Eric Fettying, where like you don't know what you're getting. But if you kind of know what you're getting, I don't think that he has the stuff to make you, to trick you.
Yeah, and so you shouted out a couple of guys who have some low angle arm slot sort of things going on who have made it successful. Tall, gangly guys. Could you shout them out again for us before, so you set me up for this, what I'm about to share?
Yeah, for sure. Because I don't know if we've even said it so far, but he's 6'5", and he doesn't go over the top. So he's a 6'5" guy with, I think when he was in the majors, his angle was something like 50 degrees. And so side, like a little bit from the side, but not crazy from the side, not as much from the side as, say, the people that you're probably thinking, Chris Sale and Sean Manaea, who are much more like sidearm with their gangly, weird angle, not something that you can emulate very often or see very often, and, has led to some success in the major league level.
Yeah, so when he was here in 2020, his arm angle was 52 degrees to be precise. So obviously he's gone to Korea, he's tweaked some things. But I was just curious because at the end of the day, as John said, this is a guy who threw his fastball over 40% of the time, 47% of the time last year. And that was how he was able to get away with being one of the best pitchers in Korea. And, I don't have the Korean velocity data ahead of me, but we do know that his pitcher was his fastball was generally around like 91, maybe 92.
In Korea, it averaged 90.8.
90.8, thank you. So I was curious, how the league as a whole in 2024 performed against those kinds of fastballs. Because at the end of the day, the risk for Kyle Hart is that he's a pitcher who is built to do well in Korea, and that's basically his ceiling. That he comes back to America, and essentially that baseball in America has passed him by. That the league is just at a completely different point where a fastball that averages just under 91 miles per hour is just not going to be sufficient anymore. And so I aggregated the data in terms of batted ball info on left-handed fastballs and sinkers that were thrown between 89 and 92 miles an hour in 2024. And as you might expect, those numbers aren't great. So the league put up a 285 batting average and a 364 WOBA, and the expected number on that was 365. Just really not good. It's just I think Jurickson Profar last season had something like a 370-ish WOBA. So, you remember Profar, and he had such a good time last year, giving up basically that on every fastball against the league, not even against like good players. And so, in John's research, he was shouting out Chris Sale and Sean Manaea. And so I was like, okay, what if we can isolate that information just based off of pitchers who have low arm angles?
Hold on, before you release this. So you said your numbers were 364 and 365 for WOBA and xWOBA, right? Jurickson Profar last year was 365 and 364 for WOBA and xWOBA.
God, yes!
It was like on the dot.
Wow. Okay. I didn't even think it was that.
It was
wow.
Exactly.
Oh God. I wish there were more things in my life that gave me a thrill like that. Like, it's really sad that I'm going to be writing off of that for days. And my wife's gonna go home, and she's just not gonna care.
It's gonna be pillow talk for you. You're gonna be in bed. You're gonna be like, and then I got Jurickson Profar, perfectly aligned with sinkers, left-handed, between 89 and 92 miles per hour.
But anyway, that's what we have each other for, John.
That's true.
That we can appreciate that. So thank you for giving me the alley-oop on that. So again, let's isolate that information to arm angles that are between Chris Sale and Sean Manaea. So Chris Sale has an 11-degree arm angle. Sean Manaea has a 22-degree arm angle. So let's look at fastballs and sinkers thrown by lefties between 89 and 92 miles an hour that are only thrown between 11 and 22 degrees. So very specific. And this, I think...
this is what you get par for.
Yes, but it's still 3,000 pitches. It's still enough that I think is enough data to draw a reasonable sample from. And the answer is still not good. So batting average, it was a 301 batting average that the league put up against those types of pitches. 287 expected, so some funky batted ball stuff there. But again, the weighted on base average, 369, expected 362. So still in that Profar zone that we were just talking about. So
you can't just drop your angle and suddenly expect yourself to be better in the major leagues.
There's not this hitters hate this one trick that we can apply to Kyle Hart. Unfortunately, unless he magically adds 2 ticks to his fastball velocity, I don't think that he's certainly not going to be able to be the same type of pitcher that he was in Korea with the same usage profile. That doesn't mean that he can't be successful with the Padres, but it does mean that he's going to need to reinvent himself in a pretty dramatic way. And this is a guy who, he's had quite the career. He's been around for some time. He was a 5th-year college senior in 2016. So he's had time. And so the idea that, now Kyle Hart at 32 years old is now going to have to reinvent himself again to have a successful career. I really hope he does it. Like, because
Yeah,
I texted this to Craig and Chris when we signed him, but like, I am a sucker for stories like this.
Yeah.
Like a guy who is down and out and he goes and he gives it one last shot and he just, he smashes it. But I'm really skeptical that a guy built like Kyle Hart, we should say, by the way, I don't know how accurate this information is. He's 6'5" and he only weighs 170 pounds. Like,
no way.
Yes, that is what is listed on Fangraphs. So I don't know if that's hasn't been updated since 2020, but I mean, we're talking about a wispy, willowy guy. And, you know, unless he puts on a bunch of muscle and then all of a sudden can generate a lot more power and throw with velocity and like just again, it's just like we're talking about him taking on a different body type at 32. I'm skeptical. Before I hand it back over to you, John, I just want to shout out that Zips, which again, we love Zips here. It is our preferred projection system, at least for me. Zips really likes Kyle Hart. It really, you know, it spit out a projection of 130 innings, a 4.38 FIP, which would be good for 1.5 WAR.
Take it.
You know,
run.
Oh my God. If we got that out of Kyle Hart, like Ruben Niebla truly is a genius. And we always talk about this 900 inning problem. If you got 130 of those innings out of the 900, like you said, John, you take that and run. I'm taking the under on that projection. You know, unfortunately for us, unfortunately for Kyle Hart, as of right now, I just don't see it. And I desperately hope that I'm wrong, John.
Yeah, I wonder whether that prediction is not just coming off of like how often do these numbers in the KBO result in this result when you come to America, rather than going into like a little bit more depth, because I just don't see that many avenues by which he could be successful. I mean, his fastball, which like I said, he was relying on his fastball heavily to get ahead in the count. He was clearly nibbling 55% of the time it was in the zone, and even then he only had an 18% swing and miss. Like, what, like at best you're getting Tim Hill, right? Like that's at best, where you're not getting a lot of swing and miss, and then you're trying to get ahead in the zone and hoping that when folks hit it, they hit it at somebody. And he does have like a, you know, relatively strange body size and release point that maybe that'll work the first couple times that he faces somebody. It kind of reminds me of like when Jackson Wolf came up, you know, and you were like, maybe this kind of funky delivery will work. Maybe if Jackson Wolf went to KBO, he would also do very well and then come back and get a good contract. But I don't know. I just his changeup has to continue to work outside of the strike zone. I think that if he is successful, which I think that there's a chance that he's successful, you know, for a few months, I do wonder whether that's sustainable for any period of time, given the tools in his tool shed. Niebla can only dig so far. It's so funny because these are like basically the exact opposite ends of the spectrum, guys, in terms of Nick Pivetta and Kyle Hart. Like, one is making the goddamn most out of his tools. You know, he's working, he's going to Korea, he's coming back, and meanwhile Nick Pivetta has like some of the nastiest stuff in the whole league, and you know, their prediction models suggest that they're not that far off of one another, you know what I mean? And it's like, all right, we need Pivetta to be a little bit more like Kyle Hart and Kyle Hart to be a little bit more like Pivetta. I am excited for Kyle Hart. I'm excited for his story. I'm hoping that those sweepers, he can throw them in the zone. I mean, he's throwing them 63% of the zone in KBO and to good results. Maybe he can throw that a lot and get poor results, you know, pop-ups, things like that. I don't see him coming over and also having a huge K rate with a low walk rate and suddenly being good with his stuff. Maybe for a few months, probably not for a few years.
Yeah, this sounds like the beginning to some very interesting fan fiction between Nick Pivetta and Kyle Hart. The guy who has had to work his ass off and to get that 26th roster spot. And then he's looking at Nick Pivetta. He's like, you have everything. You have everything, and you don't even love it.
That's why they signed him back to back. It's like, get in the room at the same time. Same culture. Everybody's going to be meeting you at the same time. So you should act similarly.
Yeah. Well,
don't you realize it? You have everything. I have everything. I've clawed my way to the top.
Exactly. Well, I'm certainly really glad that the Padres signed both of these guys. We desperately needed them. Whether or not Kyle Hart lives up to his ZiPS projection, he certainly has a very important role on the 2025 Padres, and I'm really glad he's here, and I'm really rooting for him. And I'm really, like you said, talking with you has gotten me even more excited about Nick Pivetta, just because the possibilities are endless.
Dude, I'm telling you, it's a good pitching room to be in with Nick Pivetta's, clay. Folks mold that a little bit. I'm telling you, ace potential.
Ace potential. Well, John, I think we aced this one.
Oh, God.
And
I think your first kid? It sounds like you had a kid.
The dad jokes, whether or not they are, you are a dad. They are coming faster and faster every day with every day I grow older. So this has been another episode of Pods of Replacement. Thanks so much. We didn't even say, but we hope you're watching this on YouTube because that's where you get the most out of this. We hope you're watching this on our Patreon. And if you want to participate more in the Padres Hot Tub community, talk with John and I on a regular basis, you can join our Discord, patreon.com/Padres Hot Tub. You'll get all these episodes. You'll get them ad-free, etc., etc. We'll be back soon to talk about some other additions that the Padres made in the intervening weeks since we last spoke. But until then, for John Prokota, I am Raphie Cantor. We will see you next time.